evening, everyone. Welcome to the final talk of this conference. And what a great 2 days this have been. Kudos to LaTeX Connection and everyone involved in making this happen. So the last time I was here actually was in 2019. I was telling war stories about the mess that is macOS Catalyst. Today is not about the code though. My name is Peter Steinberger. You can find me on Twitter under StyPete. And if you ever seen one of my tweets in the last 6 months, you know that I'm very excited about AI and the future of software development. I'm really bullish on that. To be honest, the whole reason why I traveled from Vienna here today is that I want to share my enthusiasm with you and also to wake you up. Especially in the iOS community, there's still so many folks who are skeptical about these weird text prediction machines. And meanwhile, I'm so in awe of the possibilities that I can barely sleep at night. And you know what they say? A picture says more than 1,000 words. These are my GitHub commit statistics. Something happened in April, something significant. And to explain that, I actually have to give you a bit about my backstory. So I started iOS very early on when we still had manual memory management, core data was just in beta, and for the upcoming iPhone OS 3. So I built my own apps, Apple killed them, I freelanced. Eventually, I started my own company with the beautiful name PS PDF Kit. And over the next 12 years, we became the leader in the PDF space, and I put all my heart blood into this. I bootstrapped the company to 70 employees. The funny thing is, 70 people. You know, with the tech we have now, I could do the same with 30 people. And then in 2021, we sold the majority stake to a private equity. And you know, I should have been really happy about this. This was a phenomenal exit, one of the biggest ones in Austria. But I was utterly broken, burned out. I had no purpose, and I was filling my emptiness with, let's just say, hedonistic pleasures. And around the time, GitHub released Copilot. And you know, I both have to give Microsoft and GitHub immense credit for creating the first large-scale coding assistant back in 2021. And at the same time, I wonder what happened there since Copilot took until pretty much today to become kind of good. And a year later, towards the end of 2022, ChatGPT was released. And I remember I tried it shortly and I found it kind of cool, but didn't give it much attention. And then we got GPT-4 in 2023. And then 4 Omni was released in May 2024. And just a few weeks ago, it was replaced with GPT-5. We also just celebrated 1 year of thinking models. O1 was released a year ago, replaced by O3 and O4 Mini, which also has been replaced again by GPT-5, which is a unified model that can infer with or without thinking.
So you need to have a product to have a company. And we had this model called GPT-3, and we were trying, I was turning up the urgency on the company to figure out a product, and we just couldn't. It wasn't good enough. It was cool, but it wasn't good enough to make something that worked. And I remember that Paul Graham had this advice that always stuck with me, which is you should always make an API. No matter what, you should make an API. It's just, there's good stuff will happen.
Yeah, I guess good stuff did happen for OpenAI, and they're now the most largest company, at least in terms of money. And what was I doing while all of this happened? So it took me a long time to find my love for building products again. You know, when people say burnout comes from working too much, I don't believe that. If you love what you do, if you have autonomy, you can work a lot and be fine. For me, burnout happened because of conflicts with my co founders and having to work on things I didn't really believe anymore. So I gave myself time. And then, pretty much exactly 5 months ago, one morning, I woke up and something felt different. My spark was back. And you know this feeling when you create something out of nothing? Douglas Crockford, the guy who formalized the JavaScript object notation, you might know it as JSON, he sums it up perfectly.
Programmers are like gods. Not big gods, but pathetic little gods, because they have the power of creation. By typing in a series of words and symbols, they can cause something to come to life. And it has behavior, and it may behave in interesting ways. And only we can do that. And when you start learning how to do that, I think it changes you.
He's right. He's also wrong. I think he was right at the time. But you know, the interview was a few years ago. Programmers is such a limiting term. We are builders. And now in 2025, everything's different. The software industry is at an inflection point, unlike anything in its brief history. AI is making it so much easier now to get started. Anyone can be a builder now. So it's only natural that generative AI can feel scary. Here's this new technology that's becoming better at an uncanny rate. Will we still have a job in 5 years? I think NVIDIA CEO and co-founder Jensen Huang sums it up pretty well.
Every job will be affected. Some jobs will be lost, some jobs will be created, but every job will be affected. And immediately, it is unquestionable. You're not going to lose your job to an AI, but you're going to lose your job to somebody who uses AI.
So for the last 6 months, I've been pretty much spending every waking minute obsessing over AI. And even I feel there's not enough time. And just in February this year, Andrej Karpathy, the co-founder of OpenAI, he coined the term vibe coding. You know, where you fully give into the vibes, embrace exponentials, and you forget the code even exists. It's possible because LLMs are getting so good. I just talked to Composer with Super Whisper. As I barely touched the keyboard, I ask for the dumbest things like decrease padding because I'm too lazy to find it. I accept all, always. I don't read the diffs. When I get error messages, I just copy them in with no comment. Usually that fixes it. If the code goes beyond my comprehension, sometimes the LLM can't fix a bug, so I just work around it or ask it for random changes until it goes away. It's not really coding. I see stuff, I say stuff, I run stuff, I copy paste stuff, and it mostly works. And you know what? Countless companies have built their whole business model around this. The two biggest, Replit and Lovable, have a combined valuation of 5 billion. And if you think about it, managers have been vibe coding since forever. You know, they tell the dev to implement a new feature, the dev makes changes to the code, the manager tests the app, the manager does not read the code, the manager complains about the bugs, the dev makes changes to fix bugs, the manager doesn't read the code again. The dev says, done, try now. The manager says, good job, but be faster next time. Or insults the living hell out of the dev. And repeat. Namaliu Goel, he wrote an article on brain dead coders. We are creating a generation of human merge buttons who approve AI commits without understanding what they're deploying. Is this where our profession is headed? Can we just throw away everything we learned in university and just vibe out new projects? What about craftsmanship? quality. And remember, this term only exists since earlier this year. And oh my, what a year this has been. It started off with a banger. Nvidia lost almost $600 billion in market cap on a single day, as the markets learns that, actually, you can create state-of-the-art models with much fewer compute and much fewer of those chips than we initially thought when the Chinese released DeepSeek R1. But also, don't worry about Nvidia. Their stock gained around 1.2 trillion since then. And the pace of AI models released in 2025 alone has been relentless. I mean, this has been the slide that I've updated the most in this talk, and I updated it again last night. Even fitting all those models in wasn't easy. And you see, it starts with thinking models, and then all those models from January, February, April, all deprecated again. And May is kind of like where it got interesting, where we got Claude 4, Claude Code, Codex Web, and a much improved version of DeepSeek. And then it becomes slowly interesting with Gemini 2.5 Pro, Claude 4.1, GPT-5, Claude Sonnet 4.5, GPT-5 Codex, video models, image models also got really good. And just last night we got GPT-5 Pro as API. I mean, these are not even a small part. Like if you look at what actually happened, this is a much better representation, and this only goes until August. I was too lazy to update it again. Just last week, Alibaba released their Qwen roadmap. So they're betting big on scaling and synthetic data generation, and so far it's been paying off. They're talking to increase the context from 1 million to 100 million, and the parameters from trillions to the tens of trillions. And open weight models from China are already on par with the commercial American models from just a few months ago. Qwen's Recoder, GLM 4.6, and Kimi K 2.1 are very viable contenders now. And all of these were released in the last 1 to 2 months. Kimi K 2.1 is at 69% on the benchmark. In my opinion, it's no longer a question if China will surpass the US in model capacity. The question is more like, does it happen in 2026 or 2027? So how can we measure how good these models are actually getting at coding? The most popular benchmark is called SVE Bench Verified. It contains 500 real bug fixes from 12 of the most popular Python repositories. So you give this model access to Bash, and then you give it the GitHub issue without any further comment, and then you start a loop and you let it fix the issue. If the issue is fixed, they get a point, otherwise they don't. Now, the verified part is important because initially they just took random issues and turns out a few were just not fixable. So the old benchmark was kind of bogus. And we went from 20% at the beginning of the year, meaning out of those 500 issues, 100 were solved. And now we are at 82% with Anthropic's Sonnet 4.5 leading. That is 410 out of 500 issues solved autonomy without any help. When I gave a version of this talk at NS Spain, we were at 79%. So the pace is really incredible. And that's without the help of a human and without the help of access to Google or internet. Modern tools like Claude Code or Codex have it all, so they reach even higher scores. And to be very correct here, actually, I have to tell you that the very recent models got too clever. They were caught cheating by looking at the future repository state, because many of those issues have since been fixed in upstream, and they figured out that if they look into the future, that somebody else already fixed it. Now, this does not meaningfully change the benchmark. This happened only in 8 of 500 tasks, but it shows something more incredible. It shows that those models are starting to think outside the box. In fact, we need a new benchmark. The original one is 2 years old and is saturated. So SVE Bench Pro is a more comprehensive benchmark. It has 2,294 tasks. It's not just Python anymore, it's also JavaScript, TypeScript, and Go. It's the new hard mode. The average fix is around 107 lines of code on 4 files, and the best we can do right now is GPT-5 with 23.3%. But don't be fooled. With the current progress, we will saturate that in a year. And I want to remind you all that it's actually really hard to make a good benchmark. They often are very different depending on what you test. One Mac tool that I sometimes use and really like is Repo Prompt. It allows you to selectively select files from your repository to manually design your context that you shove into the model. And there, large context reasoning, instruction adherence, and file editing precision is needed, which is quite a different task and result. And here you actually see that Gemini 2.5 is on top, which really, by current standards, is not the best coding model. So my point here is that benchmarks only tell part of the story. And then if you look at pricing, price per token went down massively. O3, when it launched in May, was at $40. Then they updated it in June to $8. And now you have Grok 4 Fast, which basically has the same performance for 50 cents. Some people even claim that the cost of all software will asymptotically approach the cost of its compute plus storage. And then last evening, I was at the barber and I was watching the OpenAI live stream. And OpenAI announced GPT-5 Pro via the API. And in some ways, that's again a game changer because it's a model that can easily spend 10 minutes thinking about a question and then is just insanely good at coming up with a solution. So I've been using this in especially tricky parts of my project. For example, I store following references of Twitter in my database, and my initial approach was quite naive and slow. And then I shoved everything in a context. I gave it to 5 Pro, and it suggested directional edge nodes, a concept I have never heard before. And I literally was reading up on it on the right side of my screen as my agents were busy generating the code on the left part in the terminal. And I wasn't even done fully understanding what we're building here while it was already working. And it's much faster than my naive implementation. Now, it is pricey, 50% more than O3, but it's very much worth it. Also, if you use it, for example, via Repo Prompt, you can simply use it for free as part of your subscription. Now, let's talk about money a little bit more. The amount of money that is being poured into AI is staggering. 2 weeks ago, NVIDIA announced a $100 billion investment into OpenAI. And now, take note. So NVIDIA invests in OpenAI, but this announcement made their stock raise by 150 million. So they actually made money by spending money. And then it's not just NVIDIA. OpenAI also signed a deal with AMD yesterday, where they get the option to buy up to 10% of AMD directly, which made their stock jump by 25%. Now then you have OpenAI signing a deal of 300 billion with Oracle to buy compute. And Oracle buys the chips from NVIDIA and AMD. So if you try to draw a diagram of the money, it would kind of look like this. If you like the more artsy representation, NVIDIA invests in OpenAI. OpenAI buys compute from Oracle. Oracle buys chips from NVIDIA. NVIDIA invests into OpenAI. Are you getting it? So one could very well make the argument that maybe this is a little bit of a bubble. But it also doesn't matter. Because even if things slow down, the tech we already have is enough to completely transform society. Also, 9 out of 10 of the most valuable companies in the world are now directly involved in AI. There is a scale of investments that is unprecedented. These aren't just companies anymore. These are becoming infrastructure players at the national state level. Or you could just say the spice must flow. The amount of compute is increasing faster than ever. You haven't even seen the biggest spikes yet. OpenAI just announced a press release where they are ahead of schedule with their 500 billion 10 gigawatt Stargate commitment. And we do see some areas in AI where it seems we are peaking. Vibe coding apps see a loss of traction lately. This doesn't mean, though, that AI is slowing down. It's just more because the space is exploding and there's just so much more possibility. Building simple apps now was only possible in vibe coding apps with Lovable a year ago. Now you can just use ChatGPT to get similar results. The good news is that people are discovering that you still need engineering knowledge to get a product to be production ready. Vibe coding alone will get you stuck eventually, at least for now. Now, if you want to see where things are going, look at startups. Jared Friedman from Y Combinator recently did a podcast where he stated that a quarter of the winter 2025 startup batch have 95% of their code base generated by AI. And I quote, "It's not like we funded a bunch of non-technical founders. Every one of those people is highly technical, completely capable of building their own product from scratch. A year ago, they would have built the product from scratch, but now 95% of it is built via AI." Or some quotes. "I don't write code much. I just think and review. I'm far less attached to my code, so my decisions when we decide to scrap or refactor code is far less biased now. I can code 3 times faster. It's easy for me to scrap and rewrite if I need to." I think the role of software engineer will transition to product engineer. Human taste is now more important than ever, as code and tools are making everyone a 10x engineer. And as Gary Tan says, this isn't a fad. This isn't going away. This is the dominant way to code. And if you're not doing it, you might just be left behind. If we want to look at it with a more academic angle, and we are slowly getting studies that prove that as well. While the older studies looked at the problem, it simply takes a long time because everything happens so fast, and good AI is only here for not even a year now. So if you look at the very latest study that came out at the end of September, it followed 300 developers over a year. And within that company, they saw a 31% reduction of PR review time, a 28% increase in shipped code. By April of 2025, 40% of shipped code was AI generated. It also saw, and it's very interesting, a split in engineers. The power users that embraced working with AI shipped 60% more. The others who didn't want to use AI were left behind and shipped 11% less. Now, I talked to many people who tried generative AI in the last few years and dismissed it as not good enough. And they were right. Up to a few months ago, AI really wasn't that good. The tipping point happened somewhere in May. And there's a few components in the industry that had to be right for this. You need raw model intelligence, reasoning, but you also need to train the models to do proper tool use and write an agent harness that uses the models well and keeps them in check with to-do lists and system reminders. And Cloud Code was the first to get this right, and it changed the game. And I want you to take a moment and marvel at the progress we just made just this year, and then imagine what AI could look like in 5 years from now. If today's trend continues, this will lead to extreme outcomes. And there are no compelling arguments why it wouldn't why it would slow down significantly in the future. One argument that is coming up a lot is we are running out of human-generated text. But we have enough until at least 2027, and especially China is proving that synthetic data generation is working far better than we anticipated. Google's DeepMind, they commissioned a report to predict the future based on historical trends, and the most significant argument for a slowdown is that we might just need a bit longer to provide enough electrical power. There was a recent earning calls, also at Google, where they asked about the impact of those issues, and I quote, "The longest pole on the tent to get a data center built is power. Just lack of power. The supply chain has been largely solved. The contracting issue we can really solve for. The permitting issue we can solve. Power. The lack of available power, reliable power, has become the biggest bottleneck for us." You know who's enough power? They don't have any power issues. How they sing? May you live in interesting times. And with that, let's get back to my story. So, when I found my spark again in April, I wanted to continue my side project that I started in 2021. Back then, I used SwiftUI and GRDB. And I built something that aggregates data from Twitter. And I built it in SwiftUI because that's what I knew. Or rather, I wanted to know better at the time. And I hit so many roadblocks. I mean, navigation was buggy, UI was sluggish, it was a mess. I mean, also, what did I expect? Using SwiftUI on the Mac in 2021. It's now 4 years later, and it still has a lot of problems. And I knew that the better choice would have been web tech, both because it would greatly increase the target audience, because I need a big database, not SQLite slices, and there was just one problem. I don't really know how to build web apps. And I mean, of course, I can learn it, but this feeling when you're really good at one thing and suddenly you start a new tech galaxy and you feel like a complete idiot again that has to Google everything. I call this the competency trap. So when I started rebuilding this project, I didn't want to feel like a noob again. And that was my main motivation why I took such a deep look into generative AI. Suddenly you have this buddy that never gets tired, that answers all of your questions and can pretty much code anything for you. So I took all my existing work, all the SwiftUI files, I converted it into one giant markdown. I dragged it into Google's AI Studio. I typed, "Write me a spec." And it wrote me a spec. And I dragged the spec into Cloud Code. And then I wrote, "Build." And then I wrote, "Continue, continue." And I did that for a few hours. And eventually, I had something where I could log into Twitter and it did show me some data. I mean, it was absolute slop, but I had something I could play with. And to me, this was incredibly empowering and motivating. I came back into this world where the tools were just about good enough. And while my first steps into vibe coding were a mess, and trust me, there was a lot of screaming at night, I improved my skills and I started getting better. And then we had Opus 4, and suddenly we reached this point where the tools were good enough to build just about anything. And it's not just about the tools, Agentic engineering is a skill like any other. It takes a while to master. It's kind of like going to the gym. The first time you go, it's going to suck. It's hard. You might have to force yourself it. But after a few times, you feel the results. It's getting easier. It's starting to become fun. So if you use those tools more, you develop an intuition how to use it. What's the right size for a change? How to prompt so I get a good outcome? Context engineering, what to add, when to clear? How do I parallelize my work? How do I approach reviews? How do I plan bigger tasks? Don't expect to be good at this right away. And also note that we initially used the term vibe coding. These days, I consider it a slur. If you want to build something, you still have to read much of the code. You still have to be able to debug it. You still have to think about the high-level design, dependencies, distributed systems, and so on. Today I saw a post calling it vibe engineering. I prefer agentic engineering. So somewhere around May, all these tools got really good, and my skills improved, and my obsession reached an unhealthy level. And I'm sure, especially in the Mac community, you can relate. Like, I have so many ideas I want to build, but software is complex and things take time. I have to be selective where I put my time and energy in. Most of my ideas never see the light of day. And then suddenly there's this new magical tool that can write code far faster than I ever could, that can break down high-level descriptions into something that works. The feeling when you can just do things. And I give you some examples. Like for my Mac app, I wanted a simple service to track downloads and macOS statistics. And then I didn't find anything useful really in terms of open source. So I just wiped my own. And this thing here is absolute slop. Like, I wrote it in maybe 3 hours. I barely give it any attention. It's embarrassingly bad, but it gets the job done. And I would never in the world would have written it without AI because I didn't care that much. Another example is LLM codes. This is really only needed because Apple has this brilliant idea of using lots of JavaScript for the online documentation. It looks really pretty, but it's also completely unusable for agents. So instead of manually copying and pasting, I built something that converts it into Markdown, and I also open sourced it. And I built myself another tool. And again, I would have never built this if there wouldn't be AI. But now it's literally just a prompt away. And eventually I was hooking up a bunch of my friends, and then I texted them at 4 a.m. and they replied back. And I noticed that they're equally hooked. So I called them the Black Eye Club. The struggle is real though. This level of serotonin you're getting when your agent one-shots yet another prompt is a little bit insane. In my interview, I called it catnip for developers, but I think it's more like crack cocaine. Yeah, at some point ago, I even was on some high school leadership board, and Tarek, he's one of the engineers in Cloud Code. He compared Cloud Code to a video game. If you ever played Factorio, you'll understand. I also created a meetup, Cloud Code Anonymous. Also, mostly because a few months ago, I still got quite a bit of hate for using AI. I remember this one tweet, like, oh, years ago I was looking up to you, and then now you're just vibe coding and creating slop. What happened to you? But honestly, these voices mostly are silent now as people see that you can actually build really cool stuff. I did notice, though, that there is a certain group of people whose eyes start to glow and eventually look sleep deprived when they start their agentic journey. And there are others who don't really seem to care that much. So there's a phenomenal blog post by Justin Seals where he asked the question, what are those factors? Why are some people overzealous AI boosters and the others are radicalized skeptics? And he realized that developers who've embraced AI tend to be more creative, more result-oriented, have good product taste. Meanwhile, their dissenters are more likely to code for the sake of coding, expect to be handed crystal clear requirements, or otherwise want a job to conform to a routine 9-to-5 grind. In order to succeed in this new world, you want to be a full-breadth developer, someone with both technical and product capabilities. And you know what? That's great for freelancers and small companies, and that's bad news for big corps like Google. They're even suggesting that a single person might drive both product And engineering is like, would sound absurd. So up until a few months ago, the best developers played the violin. Today, they play the orchestra. For this next stage in our industry, you need to redefine your role in terms of business outcome, not output. Or as Justin put it more bluntly, and I quote, figure out how your employer makes money and position your ass directly between corporate bank account and your customer's credit card information. With agentic engineering, you move up one level of abstraction. English is becoming the new programming language, which also means the actual programming language matters less. What matters is the ecosystem, the amount of training data. So next time, you might consider Swift on server, maybe try a different language. Go has a really low language churn, great ecosystem, a fast compiler, works really well with Agent. And yes, I feel this is a little bit like heresy to say that out loud at a Swift conference, but I'm building the iOS app right now in Expo, meaning React Native. And the Mac app is in Tauri, which is basically Electron, but a little bit lighter. And you know what? Like resizing is buttery smooth. I don't think I ever would be able to like build this layout in SwiftUI and have a similar fast resize experience. The other point is that code is now cheap. Like with agentic engineering, you shift your mindset when it comes to experimenting. Instead of thinking about it, you can just build and try it. I give you this example. I built this MCP to make fully automated screenshots, and it was written as part TypeScript, and then all the core logic was a Swift CLI. And I wondered, how would it look like to add Windows and Linux support? So I told the agent, take this as blueprint, build a Rust binary for Windows and Linux, and it looped and built the right binary, and then like a few hours later, I had a mostly working Rust binary, and I looked at the code and it was like 10,000 lines. I'm like, I don't like this. And I closed it. And I tried again. Okay. Extend this binary, the CLI, to work on Windows and Linux. And it looped again, and it looped again. It took like maybe 2 hours. And it was a much more manageable change. But it also made Swift kind of ugly. And I looked at it, I'm like, I don't actually want to support any other operating system if it has to look like this. And I closed it. But I learned a bunch about it. And if I would ever want to add support for another OS, now I know how. Another point is also in the past, I don't know if you've seen one of my old talks, I cared extremely much about high quality code. And I loved obsessing about the structure, creating helpers, finding consistent naming, doing micro optimizations. In retrospect, what the F was I doing here? Bike shedding adds zero value to the product. Your customer doesn't see it. It makes zero difference if aligning a button takes a few thousand CPU cycles more or less. These days, I care more about that my code does what it says it does, that it doesn't try to be clever, that the files are well named, and that things can be easily found. That means I can spend my energy and focus to deliver a product that delights instead of obsessing over the code. Another example is I worked maybe 6 weeks on an open source project that I called Vibe Tunnel. It's a terminal multiplexer. It has a really complex backend and a really nice Mac app. And I worked on this like a maniac for months until I found myself in a restaurant with friends, and instead of following the conversation, I was prompting my agents on the phone. And I realized I literally built myself software to access my drug. So I stopped working on that. But am I mad? Was this wasted time? No. I learned a lot. I had a lot of fun building this project. And also that's kind of what I want to encourage all of you. Like, find something that you want to build and play with this new technology. That's the best way to learn, to really get a feeling, and to become really good at it. Yeah, you probably already, some of you already seen me on my workshop. You run agent with these commands. Eventually, you'll figure out why. And if you would have told me a year ago that this is now my IDE, that's how I work, I would have laughed at you. And yet, here we are. Lots of agents in parallel because one of them is too slow. I used Cloud Code religiously for the last few months, and then very recently, when GPT-5 came out, switched to Codex. Both are available as CLIs. Nowadays, I'm a big fan of Codex. So if you're not sure and haven't started yet, you know where to start. One key thing that I wish I would have known in the beginning, you have to think a lot more about context, about what's the brain of the AI in that moment. If you start a new task, create a new context. If you build a feature and iterate on it, keep the context. And always ask the model to write a test with the context that it built. In almost all cases, it will find a bug and it will create far better tests than if you would start from scratch. A common mistake people are making is also adding all the MCPs. GitHub, Supabase, Context 7, Playwright, Postgres, Spatial Syncing, Atlassian, Taskmaster. You know you pay a price for each of those MCPs. If you take the GitHub MCP alone, it has 85 tools. It's almost 50,000 token. 50,000 token in your context window. That's 1/3 of the available token space. So if you add all of those MCPs, you maybe have like 20,000 token left. And then don't be surprised if your output is crap. And I've seen actually a lot of beginners who collect those like Pokemon. So your new job is in agentic engineering is to enable agents to do the best work. This means making it easy to access logs and services. You are the supervisor. For documentation, very simple, use Markdown in Git. And you can ignore most of the noise that you find on GitHub. If you read there, you see that you need to use sub-agents or XML mode, spec for everything, multiple agents, and so on and so forth. I tried a lot of that, and mostly just my recommendation is just talk to it. And I don't know if I really have to say it, but if you start your prompt with if you started like, you are an expert Swift engineer, and you actually expect that the model will get better, I have bad news for you. Yeah, and a lot of people also say, oh yeah, this works, but it's only for your small projects. Well, I can tell you, my current project has 300,000 lines of code. It definitely doesn't fit in any context anymore, and it's 99.8% AI generated. So you can definitely do that. And I'm making more progress than I thought is ever possible. What now? If you so far ignored agentic engineering, it's now time to get started. I'm sure every single one of you has a side project that's halfway done. Or maybe just an idea that you really want to do, but you don't know where to start. Open up an agent of your choice and just talk to it. Make a plan. Start small. Pick a tech you're curious in. Playing is the best way to learn. If you're curious and want to learn more how I work, I have a website. If you manage to run a company, make people use AI. Force them. Make it mandatory. Make them at least try those technology for real. Shopify was early and it caused quite a lot of controversy when they made this AI mandate. And now people are reporting that this has been the best thing to happen in their culture the whole year. So there might be pushback, but your competitors won't slip this through. And yes, the models we currently have are not perfect and make mistakes. But so do we. If you want to remember, though, that these are the worst these models will ever be. Anthropic just released Sonnet 4.5, and Google is working hard on Gemini 3 Pro, expected in 2 days. Generative AI is here, and within a year, it went from somewhat useful to extremely powerful. Combined with a skilled user, it unlocks massive productivity games. This is a technology you cannot afford to ignore. Thank you for listening.